Spoilers for the first 4 episodes of the TV show Silo on Apple TV+. In addition, we're also going to have spoilers from the books. You don't want to know anything? This is your warning. Leave now. So we are about to begin our book talk section.
Okay.
Kind of like always, our book talk section will begin with light, if no spoilers, but then we're going to get heavy spoilers. But if you're that kind of person who doesn't want anything at all, you can hop out now. But please, once again, if you're on YouTube, please like this YouTube video. It helps us so much. Subscribe if you're interested in this sort of thing. Helps us so much. If you're listening on a podcast app, please rate us and review us on that app. We need your help as much as possible. And don't hesitate to tell us that we're crazy, we're stupid, we're silly, whatever. We just want to hear from you. We're at PHQ on Twitter and Instagram, facebook.com/PHQ. And we will talk to you next week, if you're leaving now, on episode 5.
Of The Cleaning.
That may have been the best we've ever done it, because I don't think we had time to think about it. That's pretty good.
It's still not great.
No. Okay. We're going to open up book talk. And again, I don't consider this first part spoilery, and we're going to go a bit like this. But then at a certain point, I'm even going to have to say goodbye to Catfish, because I do think it gets too spoilery, and I don't want Catfish, who doesn't remember certain events from the book, to be spoiled at all. So The first thing we're going to talk about, though, is George. And I may have already hinted this on some of the podcasts, but George is not really a thing in this book at all. I mean, he is a character from Juliette's past. He did die under mysterious circumstances. Juliette did think it was murder. It did get labeled a suicide. But the way the book is told, Juliette's over George. She's not on some mission to find out what happened to George, justice for George. She gets the role of sheriff, and she's just naturally a bit like somebody who's given a piece of equipment and wants to fix it. She's somebody who's been given the role of sheriff. The last sheriff went out for cleaning. There's a lot of odd things going on. I want to do a good job. So she says, well, I better figure out exactly what happened to the last sheriff so I can do a good job. And that's almost her driving force, is her natural curiosity and desire to fix things, not necessarily justice for George. And so when this kind of became clear before the show came out that, hey, they're going to really focus on George, a lot of book readers were like, who? And they're like, yeah, we're going to focus on George. A lot of book readers were like, who? And they go, oh, that character that, Juliette used to have a relationship with in the past. And just to give you an idea, a character not named Juliette really is the one who focuses the most on George, which isn't much. Juliette really, she doesn't want to talk about it because that's kind of her character, but she's not angry in justice for George. She's just a natural, curious person who wants to do a good job, wants to fix things, and that's her driving motivation. One thing that I've seen a lot of book readers say is Juliette seems so angry and mean, and she threw this thing at her Shadow Cooper, and she's mean to this Secretary Sandy. Juliette really isn't mean. She's, it doesn't come across as mean when you read the book. She just comes across as somebody who's no nonsense, wants to get things done, want to fix things, and doesn't have that driving anger. I think in some ways this might be a logical choice for adaptation, give her a real driving motivation if I'm going to get justice for George. But I'll just say that wasn't something in the book. What do you think about that, Catfish?
Well, it does make sense to give her personal stakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Otherwise, why would she really take over being the chief? Do you know what I mean?
In some ways, we talked about last week about how the conversation between Mayor Johns and Juliette was almost non-existent on the 3rd episode. In some ways, the mayor's talk and Juliette not being angry at Holston, but actually kind of having respect for Holston is what led her to take the job.
But how did she meet Holston in the first place?
Well, she did meet Holston because of George's death, but that...
Okay. But she
I guess
didn't really
the way
care.
the book is, the book makes it sound like that was much further in the past.
Got it.
Than this version that we're seeing on the show.
So how did Holston and her have enough of a relationship in the book to get him to be the one to pick her?
Well, again, it was based on this history with George, where he just thought she's really smart. He knew that Marnes didn't want the job, and so he was trying to think of somebody who kind of had a logical, analytical mind like his was. And so he really had respected her, you find out in the past. I guess the biggest thing I should say that also kind of sets this up is I've mentioned multiple times that I keep referring to this first book, Wool, as a novel, but it really wasn't created as a novel. It was created as these short stories. And in the first short story entitled Wool, Juliette as a character didn't exist. She's not in the first short story. Like Hugh Howey hadn't thought of her in the first short story. It wasn't until the second short story where it's like, I'll make another short story in the world of what happened after Holston's cleaning. And he thought, okay, well, there'll have to be a new sheriff. And he created the character Juliette then, and then kind of created that she and Holston had a backstory in the second short story where, once again, Juliette that kind of stuff isn't important to the first story, so it's not even in the first story. And so,
okay.
Some of the stuff,
so this makes sense that then we don't really need the mayor convincing her, since now we've given her a personal stake in it, and it's not until she sees the carefully and still unknown way in which Holston etched truth into his badge.
Right. Believe it, Catfish, I'm going to leave you with a shock. He didn't etch truth in his badge in the book.
Well, there would be no need to.
Right. Unless he was just really like, I got some time. Nobody's called in any reports for a bit. Let me scratch this.
The way they set Juliette up in the show is, if she hadn't had a personal stake, there would have been no convincing her whatsoever, because her identity in the show is, I'm the fixer. Only I can fix this. And we know how that works out.
Yeah, we know how that works out. So, listeners, I'll go ahead and give my rant, which at times this fourth episode really had me wanting to rant, and then at other times I'm like, look, the show is what the show is, and it's so repetitive that I don't want to bore you podcast listeners if you've heard it before. I'm just flabbergasted in some ways that the book had given people so many answers by this point. Not only did we know by this point who had killed Mayor Johns, but how they had killed her. Like literally, well before this point, we knew this had happened. They've just done something else. But by the book giving you those answers about, okay, this person killed Mayor Johns, this is how they killed Mayor Johns, those kind of things, to me, it gave the readers the stakes. Like, okay, this is the person you got to be careful of because they could kill you. They're very serious. Like, this is the scenario you got to think about. And what I've seen so much online is there are people who haven't read the book who kind of know everything that you know by this point in the book, and they figured it out from clues. But in the book, they're not clues. Like in the book, I'll just set up this example. As I mentioned, the book is from third-person limited perspective. So the first short story was Holston. So you're in Holston's head. The second short story, Proper Gauge, is from Mayor John's perspective. And so the way it's told is that as Mayor John starts coughing and having trouble, she starts realizing, oh, no, something's happened. Something's wrong with me. What would have happened? Oh, when Mayor Johns gives her last breath in the book at the end of the second short story, it's a gut punch because she died, but it's also a gut punch because she realizes, oh, I was killed by this person this way for this reason. And it's like, oh, it's devastating. And the TV show just doesn't want to do that. In the next episode or 3 episodes, episode 8, maybe you'll find out who killed the mayor and why. And maybe that'll be a big dun dun, this reveal will make TV show viewers go, oh, wow. Oh, I knew that, or I figured that out, or, oh, wow, that blew me away. I didn't know it. It was just a different experience in the novel, an experience that I just happened to love.
All right. Well, Bubba, I hear you.
Real quickly, we're going to go through some spoiler feedback. Our buddy Peter in Australia, who we've already read some non-spoiler feedback from, but he just said, can you imagine the book reader audience going bananas if the Game of Thrones showrunners, Dan and Dave, were doing Silo and making these type of changes? He said, the book readers would be crazy. And he said, I even like the final season of Game of Thrones, and I think it would be crazy. So, Catfish, read this next bit of feedback.
All right. Stoker's channel says, it was a good selling point. I couldn't figure it out and bought the book. Now I've read Wool and Shift Dust up next. Haha. So,
yeah, in other words, they're leaving it confusing in these mysteries. So TV show watchers who won't wait for the answers to be revealed, they'll just go buy the book and find out. Pretty good, Stokers.
All right. And let me read this one because I want to hear your reaction to it.
Yeah.
Jal051 says, I don't get how anyone could complain. They are actually improving it. The book series is very sloppy after the first book, and everything they change works towards making it better. And they preserve what made the first book so good, the fact that it jumps protagonists and every new protagonist shows us a piece of the puzzle. I can't wait to see Bernard's episode.
I love that feedback. First, if you're a book reader who's watching the show and think the show is as good or better, let us know. I think that's a valid thing. I completely disagree, but once again, that's just my opinion. Who's to say? The one part I do agree with Jal051 on is that there's a kind of a twist to the second book that I'm not sure I'd use the term sloppy, but it's a twist that isn't as great in its execution as the first book is in its execution, and other parts of the story in the second book and the third book are. There is kind of a twist that I don't want to go into in this part of the show in the second book, which I do agree. Well, I wouldn't call it sloppy. I'd just say it's not as excellent as the other parts are. But hey, once again, everybody's opinion is valid. And here's somebody waiting, excited to learn more about Bernard. Catfish, are you that way?
Oh, man. I'm thrilled to spend time with Bernard. At this point, he might be the friendliest person we have.
Read this next one.
All right, Prometheus Williams says, this makes me glad Roadside Picnic TV adaptation never came to be. TV can ruin an awesome adventure sometimes.
Well, I don't want to say this is ruined. I still think there's a lot of good stuff. So many people tell me I'm crazy for saying this. I've never read Roadside Picnic, but one thing I'd say, buddy, is that nowadays everything gets an adaptation, so be careful there.
Yeah. Except for Bad Monkeys.
Oh, no, that's true. But Bad Monkey, a Carl Hiaasen book, has an adaptation coming out on Apple TV Plus this year, Catfish, starring Vince Vaughn. Can you believe it?
Oh, man. Carl Hiaasen.
Right.
So funny.
So funny. All right. So we've kind of done what I would call the light spoilers. We got to let Catfish go. Catfish, how can people reach out to you on Twitter and tell you you're absolutely correct?
They can hit me up at CJGman67. I accept praise and also mocking derision.
Hey, so listeners, if you have not read the book Wool, the books Shift and Dust, if you don't want to know anything else, you please have to do me a favor and leave. The great thing about this book series is all the twists, the turns. Do not continue on with the audio podcast. Okay, now that Catfish is out of the way, let's get to the reality of why it is so ridiculous that the showrunners are waiting to give these reveals. Well, the big reason is they're not that shocking reveals. If you ask a show-only viewer, hey, who do you think poisoned the mayor? They're going to say, well, maybe Bernard, maybe Sims. I suppose it could be Walker, but it really doesn't seem like it. And so guess what? You're going to make them wait 2, 3, 4, 5 episodes before you reveal? Yeah, it turns out one of those people who were the most likely suspect to poison the mayor, they did poison the mayor. And viewers are going to be like, why'd you make me wait to find that out? Or how about the big mystery that, yeah, you go outside the silo, that air is toxic, it's a wasteland, you're going to die. You're making the viewer wait, possibly 9 episodes before you say, ooh, the reveal of what's outside the silo is that it's toxic, the thing we've been showing you since the very beginning. And the viewer's going to be like, why did you make me wait? It is so ludicrous. Ludicrous, I tell you. If you've read the book and you've watched the show, I think you may be able to go with me on this assumption. And that assumption is the show could have either Sims or Bernard have killed the mayor. It doesn't really matter, right? At this point, it doesn't really matter. But also, let's just say the show decided to make Sims the murderer of the mayor. And go with me, book readers. You may be saying, why are we going this way? But let's just assume the show said, okay, in this world, Sims murdered the mayor. Well, then you find that out in episode 3, just like when you found it out in that moment in the book. But then in episode 4, when suddenly Sims is alone in Marnes' apartment with Deputy Marnes, think of how much more tension and drama is in that scene because you know, oh, wait a minute. The person who murdered the mayor is now in Marnes' apartment. It adds more juice to that scene where, just speaking on my opinion, that scene in episode 4 with Sims in Marnes' apartment, it really didn't have much tension, much juice or anything. So why, showrunners, are you making this, what I consider, illogical, stupid choice that some viewers are going to enjoy the show the whole way through? We've seen tweets of people who've had screeners, who've seen all 10 episodes, and they love it, they love it, they love it. That's great. But we've also seen a lot of people who give it kind of lukewarm reviews. And I mentioned TV critic Alan Sepinwall, who just totally bounced because he's like, this show, I don't really care to find out the mystery of what's outside the silo. I'm bouncing. Once again, the mystery of what's outside the silo, book readers, yes, we know there's a lot more to it than just this. But the mystery of, hey, outside the silo is toxic and you'll die, that isn't a mystery in the book. You know it on page 40 of the book. And by making it a mystery and having people come up with these theories, is how I feel. Now, let me get to some of your feedback. This is the spoiler version of the feedback. Somebody on YouTube wrote, "You make a good point, Bubba." Well, thank you for writing that. This person wrote, "I read the books years ago and forgot about the twist of Holston's cleaning. Watching Holston go outside in the show wasn't bad, but because it was a repeat of his wife's cleaning, it was a bit underwhelming." Oh my God, thank you for writing that. How in the world do you make Holston's cleaning the thing that captured the imagination of every reader, which created this series? How do you make that underwhelming show? It is crazy. Now, here's another bit of feedback we got. This one also from YouTube. Zion wrote, "I love the show, but I have to admit you have a point. I think they should definitely add the POV, point of view of Holston, after he removed his helmet. If they had done it, they would have made it clearer and better, and people who watch the show would not be creating these crazy conspiracy theories that I see online about how it's fine and okay outside the silo." Now, Zion goes on to write, "I do enjoy watching people do that." We'll have to see. Final bit of spoiler feedback is from our good buddy Double M Matt Murdoch, who does it on our email. So once again, if you don't want to spoil anybody, even in a YouTube comment, in a tweet, which could be spoilery, on the Facebook page, you can send us an email, hello@doublepmedia.com. Double M Matt Murdoch writes, "Number 1, I don't recall George's tunnel from the book." Well, Matt, it's funny, this is the spoiler section, and I don't want to go into too many spoilers because I'm beginning to think you may have only read this first book. So I don't want to go any further. But let me say, in this first book, this George tunnel, no. It's not in there at all. It could be something that might be addressed in some of the later books, so I'm trying to be vague in case you want to read the books and you're like watching this thinking I'm only going to cover the first book for spoilers. So that's my thought on that one. On number 2, though, Matt's second point, he wrote, "The show has not earned any of my trust that I will feel the impact and the gut punch that he felt when he read the beginning of chapter 18 in the book." Now, once again, because you've read the book, I don't have to spoil it. But if you've read the book, you know that chapter 18 is the next cleaning that happens in the narrative of the story. So the next cleaning is the one Matt's talking about, how he really had impact and gut punch reading the beginning of that cleaning. And he says, if they don't do it well, it's going to be less impactful, and it's not going to give readers the WTF moment that he had. When he was reading chapter 18, he writes, it had him going, "No!" And he's worried that everyone watching the show will be cheated out of that WTF moment. And so he mentions that a lot of adaptations can make these kind of mistakes. He thought the HBO adaptation, and I believe BBC was a co-producer on this, of the His Dark Materials show, had some issues where they kind of undercut some of the great moments from the book. Matt, his third point is he says he loved introducing Juliette's fear of the water and being underwater and this kind of stuff. And he believes it's going to make it so exciting in the underwater sequence at the end of this first book. Well, Matt, this is just a suspicion I have, but I don't think the show's going to get to that underwater sequence that happens at the end of this book, Wool. I really think the show's going to end possibly right at the very end of that next cleaning, and that would mean we wouldn't get to that underwater sequence. So we will see. We will see. He might be joking in this. It's tough for me to tell, but he believes Tim Robbins is too normal-sized. He's 6'5", and to have him playing Bernard, kind of too big and too menacing. So we'll have to see. On the other hand, he loved the recasting of Walker. So listeners, if you are being spoiled for no reason and you haven't read the book, Walker, the character, is a male character in the novel, while they got a great actress, Harriet Walter, who's so great in Succession and other shows. She's been in so many things, but as a big Star Wars nerd, I always think of her as the woman who helps Chewbacca with his injury in The Force Awakens. I mean, it's a blink and you miss it scene, but I thought she played it hilariously for what the joke was. And so those are Matt's notes. Once again, if you want to get in notes, and they are big, big spoilers, and we really, in these spoiler sections, I don't really go into details. You've read the book. I've read the book. When I talk about the next cleaning in the narrative, you know which one that is. But if you want to talk big spoilers, do it at our email address, hello@doublepmedia.com. That's the word hello @doublepmedia.com. All right, to wrap this one up, let's talk about what is the show going to mess up next. Well, really, if you know this novel, the big things that really need to start happening is Juliette and Lucas need to bond and have their relationship grow. It'll be real interesting to see how the show handles that, because they've made Juliette's ex, dead George, such a big part of the story, and really made it seem like George's death was rather recent, where, as I mentioned earlier in this spoiler part of the podcast, it didn't feel recent, and Juliette she didn't want to talk about it, but it also felt like she had moved on from that part of her life. So we'll have to see how that goes. And we'll also, Lucas has really got to become a big part of it. And also Paul Billings. Admittedly, I think he's Peter Billings in the novel, Pete Billings, but that character has really a great kind of development that happens in the background that I really love. But because they're not getting all the way to the end of this novel, I wonder if Paul Billings will have the great moment that he has at the end of this novel too. So we'll have to see. Listeners, once again, if you disagree, that is completely fine. Tell me you disagree. Let me know. Let me know if you're more frustrated about other things. I guess I'm kind of frustrated about the addition of George, but I can roll with it. I was kind of frustrated about the generator being an action sequence, but I thought they did a pretty good job of building some tension there. So this is a part of the podcast where we can speak freely. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and go down in the comments. Make any comment you want. All spoilers are open there. And if you are wanting to go even deeper and for some reason don't want to do it on YouTube, once again, hello@doublepmedia.com. I'll talk to you next week when we talk episode 5. Hey, like the video. Thanks.